Hello everyone, it's Jacob here from Southern California. I'm actually at my brother's house here in Woodland Hills, and today is a very special episode of The Future of Work because it is Memorial Day in the United States. So happy Memorial Day to everybody celebrating. And since it's a holiday, I wanted to do something a little bit different. Now, some of you probably know that I host a podcast with my wife Blake called the Be Your Own Boss podcast, which you can check out at byobpodcast.com. And in that show, we interview a lot of successful founders, millionaires, billionaires, and entrepreneurs to understand what made them successful. What are the things that they are doing in their careers? What are the things they're doing in their personal lives? And how can you replicate what they are doing so that you can grow your business, your career, and so that you can become more successful? This week, I want to share an episode that Blake and I did where we share 5 self-sabotaging behaviors that you need to stop doing right now. And this is something that a lot of us are guilty of. Blake and I have certainly fallen into this trap, and I know a lot of you watching and listening to this have as well, where we feel like we don't deserve a certain level of success. We feel like we don't deserve recognition. We don't deserve the partner or the spouse that we have. We don't deserve to be a part of the organization that we are working at. And so we do things where we self-sabotage, and as a result, we keep ourselves from really unlocking the true potential that we have. And in this video, Blake and I are going to share some personal stories. We're going to share what we have done to get out of that trap, to stop self-sabotaging, and hopefully you will be able to apply these things to your life and to your career as well. I hope you enjoy this very special episode, and please remember to check out our new show at byobpodcast.com.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Be Your Own Boss podcast. I am Blake.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we are talking about how to avoid self-sabotage.
There are actually 5 very common behaviors that we're going to go over. These are things that we have both done in the past. And so today we're going to go over what those 5 common self-sabotage behaviors are. And we're also going to share some advice on what you can do to overcome these behaviors. And this is going to be advice that actually comes from a PhD. And so we'll be sharing some of the things that she talks about in her book. Before we jump into what these behaviors are and how to avoid them, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more tips and videos on how to succeed with entrepreneurship. And of course, we always love the comments and the support, so please feel free to keep throwing that our way. Let's jump right into the topic, and that is self-sabotage. So first, let's define what self-sabotage is. How would you explain it?
So when we hurt ourselves, why do we do that? Why would we ever want to hurt ourselves? We're supposed to love ourselves and be our own best friends, right? Well, sometimes on an unconscious level, we actually feel like we don't deserve certain great things in our lives. We'll unconsciously hurt ourselves even though we think, I want success. I want to make tons of money. I want all of these wonderful things. But then our habits, our behaviors are negative, or we do things that we know are going to hurt our business. We destroy relationships. We are rude to other people. We tell ourselves nasty things about ourselves, things you would never tell people you love or your best friend. So sabotage truly is hurting yourself or destroying the potential. And I believe for many people, it's because they feel like they don't deserve it, because they're carrying around almost like baggage of shame, of self-doubt, and negativity, negative feelings toward themselves that comes out in unconscious ways.
Well, I think the self-sabotage can also be conscious. Sometimes you do it on purpose because you don't feel like you deserve something. So it could be conscious or unconscious, but the point is you're hurting yourself. You're keeping yourself from achieving your goals, your dreams, whatever it is that you want to do. Have you ever done that to yourself?
Yeah, I think that, sometimes lately, okay, here's what I'll say. I feel like in my life, there's Blake that was 28 and older when my brain was fully done baking. And then there's like the younger, more vulnerable version of me where I really hadn't seen enough of the world and gotten to know myself enough to really operate in a way that I could feel good about. As I got older, I really started to understand myself. I started to understand the world and really see things clearly. Okay, well, here's what's going on out there, and here's how I operate in here, so I can really navigate all of these waters in an amazing way, because I actually think my life has become amazing in the last 8 years. So I would say that I've become really good at this, but I've definitely worked at it. I've worked with a therapist for 8 years, which I'm not ashamed about. I always tell you guys, it's so amazing to have an objective, either coach or a therapist, to help you problem solve and be more self-aware of some of the habits and negative traits that we take with us that maybe served us as actually children, or we learn from our parents or the people around us or environment. But actually, as adults, it turns out that those thinking patterns, those behaviors are actually really toxic. Who knew? So I would say, I don't even remember the initial question, honey, when have I done this? But I would say that I did a lot of self-sabotaging in my 20s, whether that was drinking too much and hanging out with the wrong people, or getting in an argument with like a roommate, or dating someone that either I really didn't like or wasn't great to me. So I would say these are examples of self-sabotage.
So let's jump into what some of the not common, but these are the 5 big behaviors that we identified, especially when it comes to business entrepreneurship, that you need to be aware of, and then we'll go over some tips on how to stop doing them.
But you didn't talk about your own self-sabotaging. Why do I have to be the vulnerable?
What about you? I was going to go into the self-sabotage once we get to the specific behaviors.
Okay.
I have some
examples. I'm feeling like I've exposed myself to you guys. Jacob's his reputation's still intact. He never said he drank too much or.
Well, everyone's done that, but yeah. So once we get into the 5 behaviors, then I'll give I have a couple examples for some of these. So the first the first most crucial self-sabotage behavior that you need to avoid that's going to keep you from becoming successful, I think, is really around negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is really just putting yourself down, saying that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't deserve to get that project, you're not a good speaker. And this is something that a lot of people tend to default to. So I'd say this is one of the things that I did earlier on, is I had a lot of self-sabotage with negative self-talk. That whole process of, I'm not a good speaker, what am I doing on stage? People don't want to hear from me, nobody wants to listen to me. So I went through a lot of that when I first started speaking and kind of trying to create a personal brand for myself. I never focused on all the good things that I was doing, the challenges that I was overcoming, the things that I was creating. I always looked for the flaws, the negative, the problems. And that really, I think, kept me from growing at a faster pace. And it kept me from, I think just being happier overall too. So that negative self-talk, I think, was something that I struggled with. And even sometimes now, especially in like other aspects, like I have a hobby of playing chess, and I play sports. And even sometimes then when I'm playing sports or chess, I can default to negative. And I think this keeps me from becoming better at a certain sport, or becoming a better chess player, or better XYZ. So I think this is a really, really crucial behavior that people need to get over, is the negative self-talk.
I was recently listening to a podcast with Liz Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And her newest one, I think, is called Girls. I can't remember the name of her book, but she's obviously, everyone knows Elizabeth Gilbert. She was on the Rachel Hollis podcast, and she was just talking about now in her life, I think she's 50. It's not just about negative self-talk. It's also about who do you surround yourself with? Because if you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, what are they telling you? And what are you consuming on social? Like, what are you consuming? And how does that make you feel? And she was talking about how she does self-talk now. And it was really kind of wonderful to hear her talk. I mean, it sounds a little silly, but she'll say like, hey, sweetie, you're in a really bad situation. I'm going to get you out of here. Like, hey, baby, these people, they're kind of toxic.
Almost like a cartoon character.
Yeah, but it actually was a bit of an aha moment for me. Like, wow, that's kind of how I talk to my kids or my best friends. Yeah. But what if you were as loving with yourself as you are the people you care about the most in the world, and you were literally talking to yourself, hey, baby, you can do it. Hey, sweetie, how are you feeling today? Are you okay? And I first what I want to tell you guys about negative self-talk is actually something that's very counterintuitive is it is okay to be negative. I remember reading a book called Thick Face, Black Heart when I was younger about business strategy written by a woman. She's no longer alive, unfortunately. It's an old book. But what she says is that it's actually okay to be negative. That you can, if you're a negative, kind of cynical person, it's okay. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. You don't have to pretend like everything's great all the time. So I think that is important to establish. Like, it's okay if you almost have a bit of a negative personality, because I actually have one. And it's why I have a weird sense of humor. And I don't know if it's how I was raised or our cultural. Jacob and I are both come from Jewish, Eastern European, Russian traditions. And, we are kind of we are unique and different in that way. But the first thing is like, it's okay to feel somewhat negative. Because I think if you say, I can't be negative, I have to be positive all the time, your life is going to start looking weird. You're going to start having weird thoughts. It's okay to have some negativity, but I think you have to be aware of your personality traits, your inclination towards certain thoughts, and then just be aware of them. Because even now, like, I don't know about Jacob, but I still have a lot of negative self-talk. There's so much pressure as a working mom. You're never good enough mom. You're never good enough career woman. You never have enough. You're never beautiful enough. Oh, you're in your mid-30s now. You're starting to get wrinkles. It's not as easy to lose the weight. All these things, all these messages that it's pretty hard to avoid these things. But it's not controlling what's happening out there. It's controlling how you process what comes into your brain. Because some of the thoughts you have, they might not really be yours. They might just be kind of floating around there from all this stuff. So I think it's really about being self-aware and also not rejecting if you feel like you are somewhat of a negative person, because you can actually still do a lot with that and kind of channel it and having it work for you.
So is the tip, so it's not avoiding negative self-talk, it's being aware of it?
So to summarize the little things I just told you, love yourself and talk to yourself like a hey sweetie, hey baby.
Yeah,
how you doing in there? How you doing today? What can I get you? What do you need right now to feel better? Or it's okay that you're not a size 2, or it's okay that you're not whatever, have this much money or the same credentials as your cousin that everyone's always talking about. It's okay. Hey sweetie, how are you doing? Number 1, so be like Liz Gilbert. Number 2, it's okay to have a negative personality. And like I read in Thick Face, Black Heart, leverage whatever you have and how you were raised. Leverage that. But third, be self-aware enough to recognize when the thoughts are coming in that, oh, okay, it's starting to happen. I'm starting to beat myself up. What's going on, and how am I gonna be self-aware and manage it? So those are the 3 things that I wanted to share with you guys. Hey, sweetie, it's okay to be negative, and you got to be self-aware of when the thoughts are coming in. Then we're going to do something about it. So let's move on to the second piece.
The second piece is around procrastination. This is also a very, very big self-sabotaging behavior that'll really keep you from growing personally and professionally. So maybe you get a really big project, maybe you get an exciting speaking gig, whatever it is, like you get a book deal, and instead of focusing and starting to write the book, you wait till the last minute, and because you procrastinated so long, now all of a sudden you're not writing a great book, and you're saying, it's not going to be good anyway, why am I even doing it? So procrastination, I think, can really be a killer for entrepreneurs. So you want to make sure that you avoid that. I think one of the pieces of advice that I heard somewhere was you take the hard projects and you do those first. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes what we like to do is we do the easy stuff first because we can check those off our to-do list. Well, flip things around. From now on, and this will keep you from procrastinating, you take the really hard projects, the things that you don't want to do, the 2,000 words that you need to write a day, the big proposal that you need to work on, and do that first. And that way you will, you're kind of forcing yourself to go into these things head on instead of trying to avoid them.
I actually use that all the time. I do the hardest things in the morning because that's when I have the most focus, the most energy. And also, it really relieves anxiety. If you have anxiety, what's the best way to kill anxiety? Is to do. Get busy. Take action. I can remember with the 2 books I've written, just feeling like I just got to get started. And once I got started and started putting pen to paper, a lot of the anxiety alleviated. Because I think the difference between somebody who accomplishes a lot and somebody who doesn't is the first person, the accomplisher, they just do. They just get started. They don't let anxiety paralyze them.
And I think, so I interviewed Dan Pink a little while ago for my podcast, and I believe he said there are three times during a day that we work. There's the peak, the trough, and the recovery. And the peak is really when you're most focused. That's where you're energized. You're kind of ready to go. The trough is, the crash where you're kind of zoned out. You don't want to be working anymore. And the recovery is kind of when you're on the upswing. So one of the other things that you can do as an entrepreneur is identify which times during the day, and this is going to be different for everybody. You might be very energized in the morning, and that's when you're excited and ready to go. Maybe that's when you should do these big projects. For other people watching or listening, maybe you're more energized and motivated in the evening. So that's when you should be doing these really big projects that you don't feel like doing. So really understand what times during the day are you energized and motivated, which times during the day is your energy zapped, and make sure that you take those really big projects, the ones that you don't really want to do, and do it during the times when you have that maximum energy during your peak.
You also might need to consider if you have kids, like a lot of people work before their kids wake up because they have to. So, you can't always have the luxury of planning things according to how you feel, but just do the best you can with whatever your life circumstances are so you're not procrastinating and you get started.
You can introduce the next one.
Okay, number 3, lashing out. Many of us right now during COVID, stay-at-home orders, California just went back into another stay-at-home order. So we're getting a little sick of this. It's easy to feel backed into a corner by every area of your life right now because there is a lot of pressure on working parents, on older people, on single people because maybe you're lonely. So it's easy to feel backed into a corner and then take that out on other people. But I really feel like when you're in a good place emotionally and you're doing that positive self-talk we mentioned, and you're breathing well and you're exercising and you're feeling in control, then you're not going to be lashing out. When you lash out, you're probably tired, you're probably feeling backed into a corner, you're feeling overwhelmed. So what do we do instead of lashing out? Well, one thing, take a deep breath and delay. Delay reaction. Because when we're in control, we're breathing properly, we're not feeling overwhelmed, and we're delaying that initial, oh, I'm so mad, or you're wrong, and I've really tried to do this practice with my own family as there's been some stress. Even people in my family are not happy with every decision I've made about COVID. And I'm really working to, instead of lashing out, calmly talk and not get upset. Because once everybody starts getting upset, people stop listening and it's just a fight.
Yeah, and in a business context, this specifically means lashing out at your clients or prospects. So maybe you have a client that gives you bad news. Maybe you have a prospect that ends up not working with you. Sometimes it can be very tempting. You self-sabotage. I didn't want to work with you anyway. You're rude. You're crying. You kind of go nuts at them. This is something that you really need to keep under control because there have been certainly times for both Blake and myself where we have prospects who reach out and they say they want to do these huge projects and proposals together, and for one reason or another it falls through. And in that example, a typical self-sabotaging behavior would be burning the bridge, burning the relationship to the point of no repair, where there's never a chance you're going to work together in the future. And you just say, I put so much time and energy into getting on the phone with you, and you canceled this project, and you guys are very rude. You don't want to lash out at clients or prospects or business partners or employees or anybody, leaders at your company, to the point of having it just destroy the relationship, because that is a very, very crucial self-sabotaging behavior that a lot of people, I think, oftentimes participate in, which we should not.
I also think that if you are really operating at a higher level, you're not lashing out at your family, you're not lashing out at people that are your clients or people that work for you. You're not lashing out at customer service people on the phone.
That's another way.
Everyone you talk to, you're behaving the same. And I really think we all want to go to sleep at night knowing we're good people and we treat everybody pretty well. So I think that if you're starting to lash out at people, you got to take a look in the mirror and say, all right, where's this stress coming from? What's going on? Hey, sweetie. Hey, baby, are you okay? Because we it's not just because of social media, because anybody can take a screenshot of what we put in an email or record how we treat each other. It's really about like, how do you want to feel? Because again, if you're being toxic toward other people, all of that ugliness is inside of you and you have to walk around with it. That's not a great way to live your life.
The next one, and the last two that we have, second to last, is perfectionism. This is another self-sabotaging behavior where you don't do something, you don't take action, or you try to have something be perfect to the point where it almost paralyzes you from being able to do anything. I struggle with this quite a bit, whether I'm trying to create a new product or a service, or, you always tell me that I'm like, trying to be perfect with things. And it makes things take a long time. It makes things maybe even never see the light of day. It frustrates people on the team. It causes a lot of, I think, challenges and frustrations for those around you. So nobody's perfect. There's no such thing as anything being perfect. And so when you constantly strive to be perfect or to have something that's perfect, I think that is a self-sabotaging behavior for sure.
What I realized as a young person is that we all want to strive toward excellence. We all want to strive toward perfectionism. But we don't want to become obsessed with perfectionism, because what you realize when you're out on the road in the world is that people actually love your humanness, because none of us are perfect. Being a human being, you are innately flawed. And the best reactions I have from an audience when I'm giving a speech to 500 to 800 people, it's those funny moments. It's when something goes wrong or we look at something from a unique perspective. It's not because I said the most artfully crafted sentence in the history of the world. It's usually a moment where a little bit of humanity peeks through the cracks and we all laugh together because we all know what it feels like to be human. So perfectionism, you always want to work toward that North Star of everything is perfect, but the reality is you're going to drive yourself nuts and get really stressed out if you're aiming toward perfection with everything. I think a good entrepreneur, especially people who have kids, is learning to be okay when things aren't as you imagined they would be, because maybe even something that's imperfect is actually going to serve you in a way that you hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, this is why so many people love bloopers, right? Because we want to see the mistakes, we want to see the things that went wrong, we want to see what it's really like when these actors are out there, filming something, or when something goes wrong. We really like the bloopers because we like seeing things that are not perfect. So I think, as Blake mentioned, it's okay to not be perfect and not strive for perfectionism, because it's really going to slow you down. And I think the same thing is true even, as I mentioned, if you're trying to make a website or you're trying to do anything creative. That, I think, is where I struggle with the most when it comes to perfectionism, is I want everything to be perfect and ideal, and everybody around me needs to say, let's put this up there first, see the feedback that we get, and then we'll make changes to it instead of trying to create that perfect product or thing right from the get-go. So it's okay to have something that's not perfect get out there, get feedback, iterate, test, and kind of develop based on that process. The last self-sabotaging behavior, and this might be even the biggest one, is not standing up for yourself. And I don't mean not standing up for yourself in a fight and somebody's like trying to bully you and push you. I mean not standing up for yourself in a business context. So this could take the form of maybe a client that's trying to take a little bit more from you. They're trying to take advantage. They're trying to get some free stuff from you and you just do it. Maybe somebody's trying to negotiate your rate down by something ridiculous, like 50% lower than what you're typically trying to charge. Or maybe somebody's criticizing you and making it personal. Not standing up for yourself and saying what is and is not okay, I think is important. So I'll give you an example. I'm recently started doing a big project for a company, and they asked me for some fees for various things that I do. And I sent them over the fees and they said, okay, here's our budget, but here's what we want. And what they sent back was almost double the work, to the point where I was actually having to do some of this work for free, because that's how they were structuring it. And so I stood up for myself and I said, look guys, I really want to work together. I know that this is your budget, but if I were to agree to doing this, it basically means that I would have to do XYZ part of this project for free. And unfortunately, that's not something that I could do. So the client understood, they came back and they said, that's fine, we don't need to do that things. We don't need to do those things. And then not only did they say we don't need to do that, but they increased their budget by an additional $30,000 as well. So it's okay to stand up for yourself because again, a business is about relationships. It's about human beings. I don't think people are purposely trying to hurt you, but you can let people know how something makes you feel if they're asking for it. And it's okay to stand up for yourself. And oftentimes you'll find that you will get rewarded when you do.
I would even pivot that whole phrase, stand up for yourself, to boundaries. And boundaries will really protect you. And, it's a misunderstanding. They think that, like Jacob said, they think I'm going to do all of this extra work for free. Oh, okay. Oh, well, let me explain to you how I work. And it's really in your best interest because if you want me to do a great job, this is the price that you'll get the top quality work. So I think also seeing it not always as standing up for yourself, because that almost feels aggressive. Just, okay, you didn't understand. Oh, well, let me paint this picture for you to help you understand. And it's really just about almost being artful and subtle in how you put up a boundary so you don't make the other person feel attacked, but you also get your point across, you put up a boundary, and you end up walking away feeling good about yourself. This is probably, to me, the most important part of what we're teaching you today, because as an entrepreneur, solopreneur, there's no gatekeeper. I mean, it's really just you. So you could get pretty beat up if you're not careful. You also don't want to feel like every conversation you're going into, you're walking out of there going, oh man, that battle, like my neck hurts. Like you've got to be able to do this for the long haul, which means having these little tricks and tools in your tool belt, because these things will come up and just, okay, now I'm going to get this trick out of my tool belt. It's called putting up the boundary. And here's how I say it in a way where nobody feels attacked, or because people really don't understand what it's like to work for yourself. They have they had no idea when they asked Jacob to do all this extra stuff. They probably thought, oh my God, this is a ton of money we're giving you. You should be thrilled. Because they don't know that, actually this would be hours and hours and hours of extra work for Jacob. So hopefully these...
Well, yeah, so I'm going to add that. So I think having a little bit of empathy there is important, trying to understand where somebody else is coming from. And also, as Blake mentioned, not getting defensive or personal. So really just, it's okay. I understand where you're coming from. It's just a misunderstanding. Like, have that mentality in your mind as opposed to this person is trying to get something for free from me. They're trying to hurt me. They're trying to insult me. That's usually never what the client or what the other party is trying to do. It's usually just they don't know, they're unaware. So go into it with that mindset.
Assume the best.
Yeah, assume the best. Go into it with kindness, with an open mind, with empathy. We don't want standing up for yourself to mean like you need to, puff up your feathers, put on your armor, walk in there with the sword and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what we're talking about. It should be kindler and a very, very gentle touch.
It does take some bravery, though. I mean, many times I put up a boundary, and I did feel like I had to puff my feathers because it's kind of uncomfortable, especially in the beginning.
Mentally, internally, you might feel like you need to do that, but you don't want to necessarily convey that. You don't want to let
them see you sweat.
Yeah.
Even if to you feel like you're going into battle. You don't want them to ever know.
So I want to share a couple strategies that we found, and this is from the Greater Good magazine, which comes from the University of California at Berkeley. And there is an author there. She's a PhD. Her name is Alice Boyes, and she wrote a book called The Healthy Mind Toolkit. And she wrote an article for the Greater Good magazine where she provided 7 strategies and tips for how you can overcome self-sabotaging behavior, regardless of what that self-sabotaging behavior is. And I thought these tips were fantastic, and I wanted to share them with you today. So tip number 1 that Alice provides is know your typical thinking patterns and factor that into your judgment. So for example, if you know that you constantly defer to the negative, to the bad, the ugly, then before you make a decision, you need to understand that's your typical thinking pattern and say, well, I'm going to take a step back. Usually I always assume the worst, but I'm going to take a step back from that. Take a couple minutes, look at it from a fresh perspective, fresh set of eyes. Maybe I'll talk about it with Blake and see, is my judgment really true? Is my judgment really accurate? Is it as bad as I'm trying to think or as I'm making it sound? Even I think you mentioned sometimes your thoughts are not even your own, right? You default to something, and the thing that you default to is not necessarily the reality of what it's actually like.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm going to read that book actually, because no matter where you are in life, this is like every day. It's about doing this work every single day, you guys. You're never done. Every morning you wake up, or at least I wake up, and I've got to go back to square one. All right, how are we feeling? Like, it's not always easy. So I think no matter where you are, even Jacob and I we're making mistakes all the time. And we're all in this together.
Yep. So be aware of those typical thinking patterns.
Yeah, the second tip here is prioritize one-time behaviors that reduce your stress over time. The author says, a very common self-sabotaging habit is we remember to do something, but then we forget. So I think what she's saying is that consistency, it's easy to do something. It's like having a good diet. It's easy to eat well for maybe 24 hours, but how do we make it into something that's sustainable that we can do for years? So I think the idea here is that to reduce stress over time, we've got to really make these habits into something we're doing every single day. So practicing self-awareness every single day, deep breathing every single day, those boundaries, that positive self-talk, that not procrastinating. Like, how do we make this achievable so we can start to feel how wonderful it feels not to live in friction? Because what we're teaching you today, it's really about living a more seamless, lighter life, literally, and not feeling heavy, like we're always having friction in our lives. And so again, consistency and having behavior and practices that we can repeat for years.
And so what she says in her article is to basically design aspects of your life with the assumption that you're not going to be perfect. And she gives this example of how you can use technology. So for example, you can use things like Alexa or Google Home to set reminders for yourself. Like, we have a lot of modern day tools that we can use to help us be aware of certain things, to focus on these little things so that we can design workflows and processes to be consistent, to remind us of things, and to keep us on track with various behaviors. Again, maybe you set time in your calendar. You know you're going to be late for something. You're usually late for something, so you mark the calendar 10 minutes earlier.
I do that. If we have a doctor's appointment for one of our kids, I always block the calendar, and then I put in the subject like what time it actually appointment starts at 12:15, even though it's blocked from like 11:30 on.
So that's a very classic example of how you can use technology to help make sure that you create a behavior for yourself that reduces stress. Create the appointment a little bit earlier than when you need it to be. That way, when the appointment comes around, you're not freaking out or rushing or going crazy. You're kind of designing these patterns that work within your life.
We're really talking about reducing stress, and we've actually done quite a few videos, you guys, on how to block your time and all these tricks and hacks.
Yes, all at byobpodcast.com. The next tip that she recommends is using heuristics, like a rule of thumb. And we actually did a video on this, and I think it was called the number one decision-making hack. And so a heuristic or a shortcut is basically something that you can do or a process that you have so that you can make a decision quickly and you don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. So for example, maybe you say yes automatically to any project that comes your way that's over $10,000. Or maybe the example that I used in the video that we did on the BYOB podcast page is that if somebody asks you to do something, you have this scale of 1 to 10. 10 being you really want to do it, 1 being you really don't want to do it, and it can't be a 7. And you say yes to anything that's an 8, 9, a 10, or you say no to anything that is 6 and below, because again, you can't be a 7. So that's a very quick shortcut. So somebody says, hey, Jacob, we want you to fly 3,000 miles across the world, and we're going to pay you like 70% of your speaking fee. Do you want to come speak here? Well, in my mind, I'm going to say, that for me is probably like a 6. So anything 6 below, I say no to. So I don't want to do that. So easy shortcut, it's a no. So these types of little heuristics, shortcuts, rules of thumb are very, very good for you to implement. And they can also be a part of your work process as well.
The next tip is learn to love incremental improvements. I'm a big fan of saying 5%. You only really have to improve anything by 5%. Can you eat 5% healthier? Can you improve your revenue by 5% a month? I really feel like 5% is a number that I can get my head around that, hey, you know what? Whether it's eating better, making more money, being a better parent, like 5%, I can pretty much improve anything 5%. That's not a huge ask. And it turns out that over time, even just a 5% improvement can make huge gains when we look at like a 1 year period. So be appreciative for even small gains or small improvements. Applaud them in your own life, because really you don't have to start all over. If you just make a small adjustment, it'll likely over time make a huge splash.
The thing that I always say is that if you can improve by 1% a day, by the end of the year, you'll be 37 times better. So I use this oftentimes in my talks on leadership. And whether you're looking at 1%, 5%, 3%, the number doesn't matter. It's just, any random number to signify that we're talking about gradual improvement every day. So if you can make small gradual changes to your life, to yourself, to the things that you're doing on a regular basis, then you will see, I think, huge transformation over the long run. So learn to love those small, incremental, tiny changes over longer periods. The fifth tip that the author recommends is really about using strategies to make sure that you don't procrastinate or that you don't avoid things. And the simple example, the simple tip that she recommends in her article and in her book is about something simple like to-do lists. So basically creating these processes, these frameworks in place that make sure that you can't avoid something or hide from them. I remember when I interviewed the CEO of Avanade a little while ago, and I asked him, how do you do things that you don't want to do? How do you force yourself to do it? And he said that one of the things that he does is he tells other people about it. And so when he tells other people about these things that he doesn't want to do, they hold him accountable for it. And they'll go up to him and they'll say, hey, Adam, you said you were going to be doing this project or talking to this person. Did you actually do it? So you put these little mechanisms in place, whether it's to-do lists, whether it's telling somebody else about a project, like I might tell Blake about a project or she might tell me about something. And then we find that we're regularly checking in with each other. Hey, did you do that podcast? Like, did you write that book? Did you, whatever it is that you needed to do. So you can create these little mechanisms for yourself to make sure you don't avoid what you need to do and that you're not procrastinating.
One thing you want to make sure of is that you commit, though, because if you say you're going to do something, it's like when you go on a diet, like you really shouldn't tell anyone you're going on a diet or, hey, I'm vegan now, because guess what everyone's going to ask you? Hey, I see you're eating cheese this year at Thanksgiving. I thought you went vegan. So it's okay to keep things to yourself, but when you tell people, you do hold yourself accountable. They hold you accountable, and so that can really be helpful.
The next tip that she recommends is understanding seemingly irrelevant decisions. So the example that she gives in her article is, let's say it's almost the end of the workday, it's around 4:30, and all of a sudden you're starting to work on a new project. Well, you know that if you start working on that new project and it's almost the end of the day, that you're going to be home late. You're going to miss dinner with your kids. You're going to, something bad's going to happen. So it's really about being aware of these little things that you do and the impact that they might have. So if you, for example, have a meeting or something that you need to get done, and you're usually always late for stuff, giving yourself that extra 10 minutes on the calendar so that you can get there early. So pay attention to these common decisions that you make. In the example, she said that this is something that a lot of people with substance abuse struggle with. This is a common technique that they use in therapy, because you'll find somebody that is trying to recover from substance abuse, they'll say something like, oh, I'm just going to call my friend who is also a substance abuser just to say hi. And then that ends up spiraling down to you start using substances again. So it's that little decision of, I'm just going to call somebody to check in with them to say hi, for substance abusers that leads them down this kind of rabbit hole. And she uses this exact analogy for us, for work, for business. So being aware of these little things that you might do, whether it's taking a project near the end of the day, whether it's taking a phone call when you're running out the door, just being aware of these little decisions.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of substitution. Like when everyone around you is eating cake at the office, and like I used to work in an office in New York, there was always a birthday, so there was always cake in the office, and I was trying to be healthy, so I'd take my little chocolate protein bar and I'd participate with them eating that, but I felt like I was participating without blowing my healthy eating regimen. So the last one is practice acceptance and self-care. I don't think we have a society today that really talks about self-care enough. I think self-care is seen as a luxury, like, oh, you're taking a spa day. I'll tell you guys, self-care and spa days, that's like my life. I don't consider it self-care. do all these things that other people might think are a luxury. To me, it's just survival, because self-care, I've managed to not be on medication or use any type of substance to manage how I feel. I use things that are free and easily accessible, like meditation. Talk about the power of therapy. I'm a big fan of touch. If you can get a massage, I know it's COVID right now, so you probably can't, but these other things can be very healing. Even a walk or time on the floor with your dog, or a relaxing bath. Whatever makes you relaxed and feel cared about and loved, like, do that. Because if there's anything this world needs, it's people that feel loved, that feel more relaxed. I think the whole planet will operate better if we all take a moment to just feel a little more loved and relaxed.
I'm looking at our dogs. There's one dog on the floor. I don't know where the other one is.
He's next to me.
Oh, they're on the floor. You can't see them in here. So acceptance and self-care, do whatever you need to do, whether it's emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. We exercise, we eat healthy. Blake meditates.
Sleep.
I have a hobby of chess where I'm actually wearing a chess shirt.
Right.
Bonus points if anybody actually knows what this means. I doubt anybody will, but if you do, you can send us an email, morgans@byobpodcast.com. And again, that last tip, remember, practice acceptance and self-care. So those were the 5 self-sabotaging behaviors. And these are the 7 tips. You can actually Google this article, whoever wants to see it. The article is, just Google Alice Boys PhD and then Greater Good Magazine. And you should find that article pop up. And you can also check out our book, The Healthy Mind Toolkit. As usual, if you want more episodes, more content like this specifically for you, the entrepreneur, you can go to byobpodcast.com. And if you want to get our new PDF on the 7 mistakes that we made as entrepreneurs and how you can avoid them, you can go to 7thingsforentrepreneurs.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching our show. For more content just like this, don't forget to subscribe.
And if you want to get access to more of these full episodes, you can always check out our website, byobpodcast.com. We'll see you next time.